Got the YouTube live started. Let me make sure we are really there. Okay, we are officially live on YouTube, and that means anything you say. Now, you can, if you want, say bad words.
Yes. Oh, okay. But I don't plan to. Gosh darn it all.
We're bad word authorized. We're an adult program. Okay. Let me get the screens up that I need. Oh, get my Auto Magic switching program working. There we go. See if I can even get the music working. And see if I can get this done as I rehearsed it. Okay. I don't think you can hear the music, so here we go. From the studio in the bonus room above the garage at the foot of Mount Belzoni on the north side of Cary. I almost got all that in. This is the Triangle Talk Show. It is episode 29. We're going to talk about the weather. We're still not going to do anything about it. September 24th, 2018. Our man in Wilmington. And here is our man in Wilmington. Wait for the music to go away. Oh, I get to say who I am. I'm Gary Pierce, and our man in Wilmington is Bill Morine. Try hard not to say your ham radio call sign.
I know.
Because that's our connection. So we had a little hurricane.
We had a visitor.
And like a chicken, you bailed out.
I did. The first hurricane in my 27 years in Wilmington in which I evacuated.
Okay. So I guess we got to tell people who you are, first of all. I mean, your name is Bill Morine, and what do we need to know about you to just kind of geolocate you?
Okay. Originally from Massachusetts, really had peripheral exposure to hurricanes. After a stint of working in New Jersey, relocated in 1991 to Wilmington. Beautiful place in the world to be. The quality of life here is great. One of the things that we can explore in the conversation, Gary, going on is if you live that close to the water in Hurricane Alley, why have you made that choice, and does that choice mean that you'll remain there? But the answer is yes. This is the fourth time in 27 years that we have been flooded by a hurricane, but the first time in 22 years. And my wife and I have an independent financial planning practice here in Wilmington that we've had for the whole time that we've been here. And Wilmington is just a delightful place to be. Many folks in the Triangle, of course, come down and get exposed to it maybe for a day, a weekend, maybe if they're lucky for a week. I will tell you that the year-round lifestyle here is extremely pleasant. And one of the things that may surprise some of your viewers is that the lifestyle is such that even with hurricanes, we choose to remain.
There's going to be a cost. Of course, there's been a cost in life. People have been killed by this hurricane. Right. You take that risk. For most people, more of a financial cost.
Yes.
But let's start at the beginning and work our way up to where you are, and maybe in the middle of that, we hit more of this why you stay. Every hurricane that's coming to the East Coast seems to aim at Wilmington at some point. Not all of them hit, but they all seem to aim that way.
Yes.
So you were watching this one. You were watching Florence way out in the Atlantic for a long time, saying, "Please hit Florida."
Yes.
and then its track toward Wilmington seemed inexorable. For a while, it looked like it was going to go right through Wilmington and come up here where I live by Raleigh. In fact, for the first time, the center line of the track went literally over my house within about 2 blocks. and then it looked like it was going to turn way south, which is what it did, but it still went right through Wilmington.
It did.
It's going to go a little north, a little south, but that in horseshoes, hand grenades, and hurricane, close counts.
And it did in this case. The center line was about 3 miles south of where I live.
Yeah, I'm gonna put up a picture here that it's not. This is General Wilmington, and you live. I'm not going to show exactly where your house is, but you live on the Intercoastal Waterway in this territory, someplace just west of Wrightsville Beach.
Yes,
between that and Wilmington, and your house is on the water.
It is.
Okay, so as you're watching Hurricane Florence work its way up, what were you thinking?
Well, over the years, I've become much more in tune with the forecast tracks of the National Weather Service as they become perfected. As someone who's lived in my current location since 1991, I've seen the accuracy of the models improve from the 2-day forecast to the 3-day forecast to the 5-day forecast to now the 7-day forecast. And with the refinement of that models, I started to get worried, to answer your original question, a full week before the hurricane was coming here, because I knew that the 7-day models had gotten to such a point of accuracy that even with the cone of uncertainty, there was a very high probability that our location would be in the strike zone.
And it was strong. Category 5.
It was almost dead accurate, which is in itself frightening in some ways. But that's, I think, a testament to model forecasting and how great it has become.
So what do you guys that are living down there, what do you do as this is coming on? It is the topic of conversation?
It is. I think one of the most interesting questions, and this will surprise you and perhaps many of your viewers, when I get about 3 to 4 days out, and I think that the certainty is there that a hurricane is coming, would you like to take a guess what is the first thing I do to prep? I'll save you the embarrassment if you'd like. I mow my lawn. And you might ask, why would I do that?
And why would you do that?
I mow my lawn because, and this was borne out in Hurricane Florence, the accumulation of debris that gets on your property is such that any remnants of your lawn that can't be mowed is just going to grow exponentially. And you also don't want long grass to get tangled up with the debris that you will have to remove. In our case, we've had, by my estimate, somewhere between 9 and 10 cubic yards of dead marsh grass that came into my yard. And you don't want to try and rake out excessive length grass blades in addition to that marsh grass. So the first thing I do when a hurricane is coming is I give my lawn a real close trim.
Is that something that you discovered, or is it everybody does that?
I'm sorry?
Is that just you, or everybody does that?
That's me, because I know that as somebody who has to be in charge of both the combination doing myself and contracting with individuals that come in and do the yard work in a post-hurricane debris pickup mode, that it's just a lot easier to remove the debris if you don't have to worry about excessive grass length. I mean, this sounds so silly, but in some ways. But the reality is that it's one of the very first prep things I do, which is get the lawn mowed, so that by the time the hurricane hits, your grass is short enough, and also you know that you're not going to mow it for a couple of weeks, so you might as well give it as good a trim as you can before you're able to give it the next mowing, which I haven't done yet. So.
You haven't decided to evacuate yet. A couple days out.
Yes.
Well, so how do you divide your preparation between what you know you're going to need no matter what and making the decision to stay or go?
Well, and not only that, in my case, of course, with a spouse, you have very vigorous discussions as to not only you have really almost in the decision tree, evacuate, yes, no, and if you do evacuate, where do you evacuate to? And in our case, we had several choices. At one point, we were actually looking at remaining in Wilmington at one of the shelters, and I could have done some double duty there, as you can appreciate, Gary, in my amateur radio capacity as being a shelter, a ham radio operator providing two-way communications. But in the end, we decided to go to my adult son's home in Durham to ride out the storm, which in the end I think was a much better decision.
How many days in advance did you make that decision?
We made that 1 day in advance. The storm was, remember that Florence slowed down. Originally in the forecast, 7-day forecast, it was supposed to hit on, I'm going to look at the calendar for a second, if you forgive my eye. It was supposed to hit on Wednesday the 12th. And then I think, I'm doing this from memory, with the 3-day forecast or 2-day forecast, it was pushed out to Thursday the 13th, and the actual landfall was on Friday the 14th. We made our decision to go to Durham late Wednesday the 12th, so roughly 36 hours in advance of landfall.
Yeah, I think at that point, the curve to the south had been firmly predicted, and the triangle area was no longer
but still coming ashore in the Wilmington Wrightsville Beach area first.
Basically at your house.
Right. It was originally supposed to be at my house. In fact, it wasn't until after the storm I saw the track and realized that it hit Masonboro Island, which is the barrier island south of Wrightsville Beach, between Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach.
If you had stayed, would you have been there for the eye?
Yes, and I've been through the eye of previous storms. That's an intriguing phenomenon to go through an eye. It's because it's much like a orchestral movement where you reach a crescendo and then there's silence, and you can walk out into the storm, look straight above, and it's just blue sky above you.
Now you're still seeing
the distance in the opposite direction. You see the back end of the storm coming at you.
Can you always see it on the periphery? You know,
generally, yes. Hurricanes have a couple of very interesting phenomena. One is the eye, if you're lucky to go through it, in the sense only from a observational sense, because you see this tremendous wind and upheaval, then a rather quick subsiding. A chance to get outside, a chance to meet. By the way, neighbors go out during the eye. The eye takes about 30 to 45 minutes to pass over. It's a chance for you to go out, assess your damage, talk to neighbors, exchange notes with one another, and then you feel the wind pick up and you can get back inside for the backside of the storm, which usually is not as terrible as the front side. And then maybe that lasts another 1 to 2 hours, and then the event is over.
How long between calm and full fury again? Is it like literally minutes?
Well, probably about 15 to 20 minutes, I think, until you're back up to full force again.
Okay. So it starts to get gusty a little bit, and then windier and windier.
I'm sorry?
As the eye is, well, I guess first of all, as the eye is approaching or crossing into you, does things subside really fast?
It does. It's rather startling how quickly the eye comes, because you'll go through a tremendous band, and that's what the hurricanes are. They work in bands where you get torrential rainfalls and gusts of winds. And not necessarily in perfect synchronous action. You'll get sometimes just wind by itself, just rain by itself. Then you get the combination of the two in a band. But to answer your question, the eye comes and you know when it comes through, because it's almost if it's biblical, because suddenly the sun comes shining out and there's this it becomes very calm.
At this point, nobody is fooled that they think it's over, right?
Now, the veteran, we all know. As I say, it's the opportunity to go out and do a quick assessment of what damage, if any, you've suffered, either on your roof, in your yard, if you're in a location that's been subject to storm surge, how much of that may have acquired. And the other thing with storm surge is you may not have storm surge on the front end of the eye. You may have it on the back end, depending on where you are within the eye and the storm's revolution.
Anybody think, gosh, this was pretty bad, I'm going to take this opportunity to get out?
During the eye?
Yeah.
No. Well, no. I think everyone knows at that point you're stuck there. You'd really, and in here especially, it's drilled into us that if you're going to commit yourself to stay. You don't call 911 or emergency responders even during the eye. You just ride it out. And most people ride it out at that point because they realize that the majority of the damage has been done. You're just on the backside. You've reached the climax, and now you're just waiting for the story to end.
The eye is not an opportunity to do anything other than take a quick look around.
Well, you can. I know people, I haven't personally, but I know plenty of people who've had leaks that get up on their roof during the eye to put a tarp down or something, and they have enough time to do that. It's perfectly feasible and normal to do.
And of course, you may be in the middle of the eye, but you may be on the edge, and you're not going to get that 45 minutes. You'll get 10 minutes.
Right, exactly, depending on exactly. But again, if you're quick, you can put up a tarp in 10 minutes. If you can schedule that and get a pretty good flavor of how much time you have.
So what went into your decision to evacuate this time? Because as you're saying, this is the first evacuation after how many hurricanes?
I would say, it's funny you were saying, I was just trying to add up. This is the fourth hurricane in which we have flooded. If you count non-flooding, I've probably easily been through at least a dozen hurricanes in 27 years. First of all, we'll never evacuate just on a wind basis. That's just because the types of homes that we have in the area in which I live, of Wilmington, people build their homes on pilings. Those pilings are sunk usually somewhere between 20 and 28 feet into the soil. There's no bedrock underneath because of all the soil here, but that is enough through compaction to give you the stability that you need to make sure that your home is not rocked according to wind. And your home won't, the pilings won't disappear either because of storm surge. All you're doing is seeing at that point is, if it's just a wind event, most people in Wilmington are not that concerned unless they're in a heavily wooded area. The greatest fear to us and thing against which we need to guard is that of storm surge.
Yeah, I'm showing a picture from your Facebook page that shows the side of your house, and then we can see the bay or the inland waterway out beyond it. And the audio folks won't be seeing this, but what I'm looking at is kind of like a beach house where things are raised up, although you've got some pieces that go right to the ground.
Yes.
Your air conditioning systems are raised up, it looks like about 4 or 5 feet.
They're higher. They're 6 feet at the base.
Okay, so that's all taller than it looks in the picture, maybe. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a little ladder. Maybe that's a 6-foot ladder, I guess.
That's a 6-foot ladder, yes.
Okay, so that's some pretty good scale. So 6 feet so maybe the base of the floor is going to be 7 or 8 feet. Was not enough this year.
Well, the storm surge came in on the ground floor. You went, getting back to your question, what made us decide to evacuate? At one point, remember that in the early days of the projection, I think at days 5 to 7, this was forecast to be a Category 5 coming ashore at a Category 4. We are all enormously relieved, of course, that by the time it made landfall at Wrightsville Beach or Masonboro Island, it came in as a Category 1. That's a tremendous reduction in speed. We were looking at 150 miles per hour initially with the first forecast, and it came into Wilmington at 105. And your viewers need to remember that the difference in wind speed and the effects of a hurricane is not linear, but is rather exponential on the Simpson-Saffer scale. So it's a tremendous reduction in force when you go from 150 to 105. I still think we did the right decision, Gary, to leave when we did in terms of getting out and going to Durham. Well, the other thing you said that what made a decision to evacuate was that at one point the projection of the storm surge was going to be as high as 13 to 15 feet. And the bottom of my second floor of my house, which is the main living area of my house, is at the 17-foot mark. So I was within possibly 2 feet of my bottom floor, my second floor living area. And that really was what pushed us over the edge to make the decision to evacuate.
So it's not feasible, I guess, to build a house up high enough that it's going to miss all that flooding and have it go underneath?
Well, of course, you go back to probabilities, and as Governor Cooper mentioned the other day, I think it was he, that we've now had 2 500-year floods in 2 years in many areas. So obviously, we've met 2 statistical abnormalities. My particular home was built in 1974, and it was built in a standard that was, even at the second floor level, below that of Hurricane Hazel, the infamous 1954 hurricane that was the measure mark here in the Wilmington area as being and to this day remains the only recorded Category 4 hurricane to make landfall in the Carolinas. But still, ever since then, there's been nothing of that magnitude. We are, by the way, are just absolutely astounded. When I say here, I'm referring to those of us who live on the mainland of Wilmington facing Wrightsville Beach, that given the proximity that we were to the eye, that we didn't have as much storm surge as we did, and that the more powerful impact of the storm surge was even north of Topsail Beach in Jacksonville, where it was much more strongly felt in the New Bern and Morehead City area.
Yeah, I think that surprised us up here that as it was making landfall or within 12 hours or so, the reports started coming in from New Bern and not Wilmington about all the storm surge.
Right.
And how bad it was going to be.
And the fact that I had at my location a 1-foot storm surge, I technically got 11 inches, is just miraculous, because I mentioned I've been flooded 4 times in my home, and this is the least amount of the 4 hurricanes I went through in which flooded us: Fran, Bonnie, Floyd, and now Florence.
All right. So in the evacuation, you were evacuating one day out. They had been calling for an evacuation before that. When did they start urging you to leave?
No one physically knocked on the door. Nobody contacted us from any governmental authority to leave. The decision to leave, and I'm going to say something which is counter to public safety, but we left, as I mentioned, the Thursday morning prior to the Friday landfall, and by that point, Wilmington was a ghost town. It was very clear that most people had gotten out of Wilmington Tuesday or Wednesday, and so there were very, very few people in Wilmington and very few people on I-40 heading north from Wilmington to the Triangle.
Okay, so you didn't have a traffic jam.
Not at all. We made Durham in record time.
Did they turn both lanes of 40 out of Wilmington?
No,
outbound?
It was the regular configuration: the 2 dedicated lanes northbound, and on the opposite side, the 2 dedicated lanes southbound. The only traffic going southbound we saw were really, or the majority, the overwhelming majority of southbound traffic were electrical repair bucket trucks heading into the area for staging.
Okay. Were you getting reports of traffic jams before, the day before? Did it get bad, hard to get out of town?
Yes. Friends of ours and acquaintances who were leaving told us of tremendous, by Wilmington standards, traffic jams of 40 minutes to an hour to get out of Wilmington the Tuesday and Wednesday prior to the storm. But as I said, for us, the Thursday before the storm, there was no issue whatsoever.
So that is not something that we're advising. Wait until the last minute.
I concur with that. I'm not saying that as a tactic. I'm saying that that's just an observation that I think because we waited as long as we did, because the storm did slow down, we were spared some of the traffic hassles.
Yeah. Did you talk to people who were deciding to stay?
Yes, my immediate next door neighbor stayed. He is a commercial fisherman by trade down here. He has 4 children. His wife and his 2 younger children went to her family in Raleigh, and he and his 2 older sons, who were teenagers, remained. They actually took some rather vivid Facebook photos and video while they were in their home. And they went through the storm surge themselves. It was, I think, very nerve-wracking, quite candidly, upon them, and tremendous vibrations. One of the things, if you've never been through a hurricane, I've been through a few of these where I have windows at my home that are rated to 156 miles per hour, and I have placed my hands on the glass during gusts of like 90 to 100, and the sense of pulsation which you feel gives you a very minimal sense of security, and it just makes you have a newfound respect for the toughness of glass and the resiliency of glass. And I've been very thankful and grateful that in my entire 27 years here, I've never had glass break as a result of wind.
Do you board things up?
I have sorry. I have hurricane shutters.
Okay,
and so originally when we first moved here, we did not. After the first major hurricane that we went through, which was Fran, we then installed the hurricane shutters. They've worked extremely well. And one of the things that's been makes it great in a coastal environment is not only the amount of protection, because all the hurricane shutter does is prevent or minimize an object from directly hitting, an airborne object hitting the glass. It doesn't necessarily reduce the speed of the wind that is hitting the glass. It may provide some protection in that regard, but the glass is still subject to all the flexibility it needs during variations of wind speed. It's just providing a small barrier so that something that's airborne just doesn't make a direct contact and hit and then crack the glass. The shutters have just been great, and one of the things, though, that's advantageous about having hurricane shutters as opposed to plywood is, and this goes back to the old days of forecasting, I went through this one year that I put up plywood, and a storm that was projected to come through missed Wilmington and went to the Outer Banks. And so I had spent 2 days erecting all this plywood, only to find out it wasn't necessary, but there were other storms that were that year that were being created off the coast of Africa with such frequency that I kept the plywood up for 6 weeks. And that just made for a very dark and uninviting home environment. So the beauty of the hurricane shutters are that I can, within 20 minutes, I can have all the hurricane shutters up and I'm back to normal lifestyle and living again.
So you're up in Durham now and watching TV.
Yes.
Probably glued to it 24/7.
Yes.
And all of the television in the triangle was basically coming out of New Bern and Wilmington.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. I've been on vacation down there, and I know that one of the TV stations that's owned by Capitol, the same folks that owned WRAL up here. They now have their weather comes to you from Raleigh, Greg Fischel and those guys. What about the rest of the news? Do they have their own crews?
They're stationed down here?
Yeah.
No, not this time around. Morris Media is now the CBS outlet. Of course, WRAL is no longer CBS; it's NBC.
Yeah.
The Capital Broadcasting does not have a television presence in terms of a news team of which I'm aware here full time in Wilmington. So I think
it's your local guys doing the news.
Was imported from Raleigh to come down and provide the feeds back. But you're absolutely right in the sense of, as a Wilmingtonian who's been now a refugee in Durham, I was just highly appreciative of the coverage that was coming out of Wilmington. That was a dramatic change from the last previous large hurricane, which for us, which was Floyd in 1999. So roughly 19 years later, we were finding that just outstanding television coverage. And the other thing which was very different too was that, and you may know the statistic, that the year 2012, the year of Hurricane Sandy, was the first year, I think, that industrial engineers, I'm trying to remember who the authoritative group is, was the crossover year in which cellular telephones finally replaced landlines for reliability in storm-related disasters. In other words, you could get a dial tone more reliably from a cell phone and a signal than you could from a landline. And that has proven itself, or did prove itself this time in Hurricane Florence, because I know that of the 4 major cellular carriers, that at least 3 of them were up full-time, to the best of my knowledge, in the Wilmington area during and after Hurricane Florence.
Yeah, and you're on your phone now.
Yes.
And your cable or internet, however you get your internet, that's out.
That's correct. My ISP provider is out in our neighborhood with no prognosis as to when it will be back.
Did you get that through cable?
Yes.
And did you even have a landline phone anymore?
I do, and the landline phone is working.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm batting 667, which of course gets you into the Hall of Fame if you have that kind of batting average.
Okay, so you're up in Durham and you're watching the local stuff. Do you get any other news? Can you call folks down here? And you
yes. Well, some things that were highly helpful were, of course, the live television reports on commercial broadcasting coming out of Wilmington, and then the Facebook was just tremendously helpful this time with providing all sorts of information. Now, just as you must do in real life always, is you have to assess because of citizen journalism, what is the value and what is the authenticity of what's being posted. But most of the information coming out was pretty reliable and very helpful. And then also, as long as there was cellular service, there's an app that it proved to be very helpful called Zello. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I've been using it now for a few weeks.
Yes, Zello ended up being highly resilient, and there were about 3 major talk groups in the Wilmington area allowing people to talk to one another to get information, the largest of which, when I looked at it, was 279 participants, and that was another tremendous source of gathering information during the storm.
Yeah, let's talk about Zello later on if we can remember, because I've got some comments and questions from listening to Floyd Traffic on that. The hurricane has passed, and now people are filtering back into town, or was it still a ghost town for a while?
Still a ghost town for a while, because of the 5 main arteries in and out of Wilmington. It was always almost like a whack-a-mole situation. Which one was going to be open next and which ones were closed? And that changed continually. I want to give a shout-out of praise to the group that runs the North Carolina Ready app, which has embedded in it live traffic maps and conditions, which are updated hourly. And that was our guide to help us back. As you may know, I-40, Interstate 40, was closed due to flooding fairly quickly after the storm, and was only opened today, which is
Monday.
I'm only track of my days. It's Monday the 24th.
Monday.
Yeah, so 10 days after the storm, I-40 opened, which meant that the other 4 routes, all of which were not interstate quality, but rather either 2-lane or secondary roads, were the main access points in and out, and those would change back and forth day by day. And so you had your choice of either 17 from the north from Jacksonville into Wilmington. You had your choice of 421, which parallels I-40, coming out from Clinton and Sampson County south, 7476 heading eastward from Lumberton and Whiteville, or Route 17 from the south coming in from Myrtle Beach. And those would alternate day to day as to what's open and what's closed. And that had remained and continues to remain very frustrating.
Yeah, I think officials were, even though a road might have been passable, they were still closing it so that they just didn't get inundated with traffic.
Absolutely. And these roads were not built to specifications of both the volume of traffic and the weight of traffic. Now remember, you're having supply vehicles that are trying to come in. They're much weightier, and so something that was built to interstate quality to handle high volumes of trucking, now you have a secondary road that may not be built to the standard to withstand that much weight continually. And so, for example, Route 421 in Rocky Point, just north of Wilmington, just you cross out of New Hanover County into Pender County, had a large road collapse. And I believe, I'm not positive on this, I think some of the contributing factor to that might have been just excess weight over and over again on that section. Yeah,
well, the news today and for the past several days since you've been down there continues to be about 80% from Wilmington, Lumberton. I think New Bern has gotten into better shape faster than the Wilmington, Lumberton area, but I mean, your flooding is still about 80% of the news that we're seeing up here.
Right, and of course, my living directly by the coast, the difference is it's very critical that your viewers understand the difference between coastal flooding and river flooding. Coastal flooding is an event that is largely due to storm surge, and then if levels remain high, you do have to follow the tide chart. Like, for example, tonight, which is a full moon tonight, there were reports of coastal flooding on the main downtown area of Wilmington to the Cape Fear River. It was a conjunction of full moon being on a tidal basin, because the Cape Fear River is tidal, even at Wilmington, and then the cresting of the Cape Fear River. So tonight there was a picture on the local news here of about 6 feet of water which had breached the banks in downtown Wilmington.
Yeah, and where you are on the Intercoastal Waterway, it is just the storm surge and just during the hurricane.
So once coastal flooding is over, then the other issues of flooding are not applicable to the beach towns that you think about: Wrightsville Beach, Topsail Beach, Hampstead, Wilmington, Carolina Beach, Curie Beach, etc.
Yeah, a hurricane is powerful, but it can only push the ocean around so much.
Right, and so those issues don't become important for those of us immediately on the coast. However, we have tremendous knowledge and sympathy for river flooding, which tends to be very sustainable, meaning it just lingers on and on, whereas coastal flooding is actually relatively quick. It's in and out. Yeah. I'm not aware of what the actual duration of time is. I have been told that storm surge usually is around a 45-minute phenomenon of soaking, and then the water retreats. Whereas, of course, we see these classic photos of river flooding that just remains in place for very long periods of time.
Yeah. What route did you take to get back?
The day we woke up, which was Thursday, my wife and I woke up, we immediately went to the NC Ready app which I highly recommend for people who have smartphones. It's available on both the Apple and Android platforms, operating systems. We went I-40 to Route 70 east to Kinston. It got very dicey when it got closer to Kinston because the Neuse River was rising, and heading east towards New Bern. We weren't going to New Bern, but we were trying to pick up Route 258 south to Jacksonville. One lane of Route 70 was closed, so all traffic had to merge left into the left lane, and the Neuse River was still rising. My understanding was that 2 hours after we passed, Route 70 was shut down because of the flooding of the Neuse River. And then we still had some back roads we had to take through Kinston in order to get on Route 258 south. Once we got there, that we didn't encounter any flooding problems, but just backup of tremendous amounts of traffic on this back road 258, which was smooth sailing, but just the volume of traffic was horrendous. And then lots and lots of traffic in Richlands and Jacksonville before we turned south on 17 to get into Wilmington.
Yeah, towns that are not designed for that volume of traffic.
No.
And this is all people trying to get home. No tourists yet.
No, I think the tourists had fled. Exactly. These are folks that were returning not just to Wilmington, but to a lot of the coastal towns between Jacksonville and Wilmington, like North Topsail, Surf City, and Hampstead.
Wilmington population is what, about 180,000?
The city proper is 111,000, or I'm sorry, 118,000. The metro area is roughly 250.
Okay. Do you have a guess as to what percentage evacuated and what was remaining?
I don't. It would be pure speculation on my part. I will tell you, Wednesday night, I went out to run an errand, and that was Wednesday. I remember the storm hit Friday, so that's 36 hours, I think, before the storm hit, roughly. And Wilmington was just quiet as a mouse. That's the other thing that's astounding. When a hurricane is approaching, and because I live in the Intracoastal Waterway, boat traffic ceases. And it's amazing how in our daily life, boat traffic becomes white noise, and you just accept it in the background. It was as eerie as you may remember when all the planes were grounded following the terrorist attacks in 9/11.
Yeah,
that was
weird.
I was struck by how quiet the skies were. It's the same phenomenon. You just don't hear things. You don't, and even after people board up, it becomes very, very quiet.
Now, with all the people evacuating, did the stores empty out like they do up here anyway, or did people not buy a lot of stuff?
Here's the interesting thing. Not only do they empty out just in the classic manner where all the perishables disappear because people want to hoard them, but this time, Gary, the astounding thing was how long it took for perishables to be replenished back in the stores. So after the storm passed and Wilmington was isolated, the grocery stores were open, but they were selling primarily canned goods. There was no dairy, no meat, no produce to really be had. And those are the things that people were really looking for. It took a fairly long time to get the restoration of those goods back into the grocery stores.
Well, there's still no way to get them into town.
No, and again, the same thing. All these trucks were coming in town were subject to the vicissitudes. There's a good $10 SAT word of what routes would be open and not open. And again, apps like the NC Ready app, the NC DOT site were just constantly switching and rerouting traffic in and out of the city. And so I know many both a person and a supply truck that maybe was coming in from Route 17 to the south that suddenly got rerouted another way. And I know lots and lots of people who have gone to Charlotte who ended up having to come back not on the direct route of 74, 76, but rather having to go through Raleigh and then the way we did, 70 east to Kinston, down to Jacksonville, and into Wilmington from the north.
Yeah. Last I looked, you still couldn't get directly from Charlotte in. I'm not sure if that opened as 40 did. I don't think so.
You can't now. My understanding is that
still closed in
areas
Lumberton.
Of, Whiteville, Fair Bluff, Cerro Gordo are still flooded.
Yep. We got a beach week in Holden Beach in 2 weeks, and we think that Holden Beach is doing okay, but you can't get there.
Yes.
You can, but
I think it is. Interesting, getting back to our mutual ham radio world, I was supposed to attend a meeting next Monday night at the Grand Strand Amateur Radio Club on Monday, October 1st in Myrtle Beach. And not because of me, but the club secretary and I had a conversation today, and he's saying that they're on standby to perhaps cancel that meeting because of the flooding from the Waccamaw River in the Myrtle Beach area.
It's still coming up.
Still coming up, right.
As water drains from the interior. As you were working your way down, how did you look at the changes in the highways ahead of you? Is it all on the Ready NC app or radio stations broadcasting things?
It is. You as I say, the state was NCDOT was updating the app hourly. And so I would constantly check the app to see what would happen. And there were minor changes en route that thankfully weren't major ones for the time that we went. But as I said, we were within 2 hours of Route 70 eastbound through Kinston to New Bern being closed. And we squeaked through on that one. I'm not quite sure those who immediately followed us, what they did to get into Wilmington to reroute. I think 421 was possibly still open that time, but that's a long trek to reroute yourself from Kinston back to 421 on the other side of I-40.
Yeah, I guess if a road closes ahead of you, you're suddenly in traffic that's not moving at all.
Well, right, and then you're doing. And the other thing which was very handy was Waze, that app, WAZE.
Yeah, I was going to ask if Google Maps or Waze was giving you anything useful.
Google Maps, not so much. Waze was, because Waze would post up ahead little icons, including policemen. And in this case, I didn't interpret police meaning bad, but police meaning that probably at least you could get somebody pointing you in the right direction to go with, or a detour sign, or that there was some kind of managerial intervention that could guide you as to where to go. And so we did see ample number of sheriff's deputies. I never knew we had so many members of the State Highway Patrol in North Carolina until this one trip. They were everywhere and doing an excellent job, I might add.
I can tell you the other way you can tell how many there are is go to the State Fair. They are all at the State Fair.
Which is coming up shortly.
Yeah. And, you were up here. We did not have a hurricane. Anybody who was, the last show we did was called Hurricane Virgin. Not the name of a hurricane. It was about being a hurricane virgin. Yes. All the people that had moved into this area since Fran went by, and they came in. They were hurricane virgins. They still are. They did not experience a hurricane.
And not only that, Gary, but my son's particular subdivision in northeastern Durham County seemed to be especially immune from a lot of what was going on. I remember seeing reports of trees falling and all sorts of activity in Raleigh, and I looked out the window in Durham, and it'd barely be raining and no wind. So it was, even within the Triangle area, there were these little oases and patches of inactivity.
Yeah, around here, nothing. We didn't even lose power. A few trees went down here and there, and you had to go a little bit farther south to get anything serious.
Yeah.
What did you know about your home before you got there?
My neighbors, I had, as I said, my immediate next door neighbor, the commercial fisherman, had given us reports. Then my neighbor on the other side, who remained in Wilmington but not at her home, but rather at another place more in the central part of Wilmington, away from the Intracoastal Waterway, came back, and we knew that there were many, many old trees that had fallen down at access points. Particularly, there's that road which parallels the Intracoastal Waterway in Wilmington called Greenville Loop Road. It goes on for about 2 miles, and a lot of homes are on the waterway are fed off of Greenville Loop Road. That particular road took a rather significant infrastructural hit by the amount of downed trees that disrupted electrical service, cable television service in the area. In fact, Wilmington Mayor Bill Saffo specifically mentioned Greenfield Loop Road as one of two areas especially hard hit during one of his City of Wilmington and joint New Hanover County briefings following the storm.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on Google Maps here and showing it to the video audience, and it's like it's in a forest, or it used to be.
It is, and that's been tremendously. The recovery has been very difficult along there. There are still massive piles of debris. I hope I get this right, and I may be off on this. As you may know, and your viewers may know, much like the rest of North Carolina, many places consist of incorporated and unincorporated areas. And in New Hanover County, we have, I'm doing this from memory, I think we have a total of 6 incorporated municipalities. The city of Wilmington, which is the largest by far, and then we have the beach towns of Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, Curie Beach. And after that, if memory serves me, I think maybe it's only 4. The rest of the county, which is called New Hanover County, is unincorporated. And where this comes into play is that disaster response recovery is based on whether you reside in one of the incorporated municipalities or you reside in the unincorporated county areas. So I use that as background to say that there are 40 debris crews which are currently picking up, and I think those 40 are assigned to the unincorporated New Hanover County area. But I think the same company that was contracted was also contracted by the city of Wilmington. These are very large trucks. They're somewhat sinister looking. They almost look like gigantic Humvees painted gray with white lettering, and they carry very large trailers behind them, so that the trucks have a back area that is available for debris, and then there's a boom on that truck, and then there's a trailer behind. And I mean, they are rather large. It's the equivalent in length of a trailer like a semi, 53 feet long. So they can pick up massive amounts of debris. And these 40 contrasted trucks, now if all 40 are configured like the ones I've seen so far, think of this that each is 2. That would mean there are 80 units out there that have capability of picking up debris and taking it to where it needs to go.
Almost like they've done this before.
Yeah, well, it's very evident that the company that does this, whose name I can't recall right now, has configured their assets to be hurricane disaster recovery type assets.
Yeah, it's like around here in Wilmington, even more so. We don't prepare for deep snow because it doesn't happen that often.
Yes,
but you guys are prepared for hurricane recovery.
We are. Well, although, for the record, I did bring my snow shovel with me when I moved here in 1991 from New Jersey. And just a humorous insert at this point, after the first snowstorm, which we get about every other year, we get some accumulation of snow in Wilmington. We probably get a big snowstorm on average, big by Wilmington standards, which would be, we'll say 4 inches or more every 4 or 5 years. And we had a big storm in the 90s, and I shoveled my way dutifully out to the street. My neighbor said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm shoveling out to the street, and then from this point the plow can." He looked at me, and said, "The plow?" He goes, "The plow is in Clinton."
But you're ready for
it down to Wilmington.
But you are ready for hurricanes.
We are ready for hurricanes.
Yeah.
We've gotten much better at this, Gary. And somebody said the other day, this kind of gets into the qualitative life portion. Having been through something like this and the misery that goes with it, why do we elect to stay? And I think the answer is that, or my opinion, the answer is that the quality of life here is so delightful that the high inconvenience that you get from an event like this, which will take us in reality probably about 3 months to recover in terms of reconstruction of what needs to be done, is still worth it. The last time we were flooded was 19 years ago was the last time that we were flooded. And we've had an excellent run since then. And we've also, every time we rebuild, we put in some new advent of code and technology that mitigates the degree to which the losses the next time will happen. And it will happen again. But we're getting better at it. We, not just us individually, but the building industry is getting much better too. This time around, for example, I don't know this yet, but I had to get some sheetrock removed. I may put up a type of concrete composite rather than sheetrock in a manner that if I know a hurricane's coming or one does come, rather than go through individual sheetrocking, all I do is take some screws and just screw off a set of panels, let that area of my house dry out, re-insulate it, and just screw the panels back into place.
Are you able to move furniture, things like that, from the first floor up to the second to give it a better chance of?
Depending on the size of the furniture. Since I'm a ham radio operator, I had my operating desk on the ground floor that was flooded. My equipment I was able to get upstairs, but that desk was way too big to do. And just before I joined you on tonight's broadcast, I was talking to somebody. I thought he had an excellent idea. He said, "What about your desk, which is big and large and cumbersome?" I said, "Well, unfortunately, it took about 11 inches of storm surge water, and I'm afraid that it has a very lovely veneer on the outside, and I'm sure that veneer is going to delaminate from the salt water intrusion." And he said, "I've got an idea. Why don't you just cut off the veneer at the watermark, let it dry, and then go get a 12-foot tall brass kick plate and just screw that on the bottom so that it looks as though it's got a brass skirt around the edge." Well, actually, I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah, 12-inch, not 12-foot, but yeah.
Yeah, and so I just may do that following the hurricane.
So there's always a way.
There's always a way.
What else did you find when you got home? Power was back on at that point.
Yes, that was another decision. You said what were the decisions to come home? One was that the route was open. The other was that we were getting teaser notices by text from Duke Energy that they were moving closer, and I give fairly high marks to Duke Energy for the notification. We did get a false notice saying that that power had been restored, when in fact that wasn't true, but I figured that it was getting much closer to restoration, and in fact power was restored very shortly before. No, it was restored late the night, Wednesday night, prior to our leaving Thursday from Durham to go back and return to Wilmington. So when we got back,
one question: do you shut off all the breakers and stuff so that power doesn't come on and destroy things?
No, I was bad in that regard. No, I left everything on, and I think I did one of those Homer Simpson moments where I went, "Dope," that I probably should have, but no, I didn't. Luckily, as far as I can tell, nothing blew from an excessive power surge when the power was restored.
Did you have appliances like refrigerator and stuff that got their bottom end soaked?
No, I not that I'm aware of, and that's the other thing of a hurricane. This is very interesting. You can go months, maybe even years after a hurricane, and something will fail, and will fail as a result of the hurricane. Sometimes you can point back to it, sometimes you can't. Let me give you a really good example, especially with coastal flooding. Coastal flooding, because it has salt water in it, will fatigue all materials. And I'm not talking just ferrous metals. I'm talking all materials, wood, metal. About the only building material of which I'm aware that stands up to salt water is copper. Copper wire, particularly anything made from copper, holds up very, very well. Your ferrous metals, of course, will rust immediately, but salt water will take its toll on brass, on aluminum, on stainless steel, unless it's a really high-quality stainless steel. But most consumer-level stainless steel will succumb to salt water. And so you've got to change out almost everything in building material-wise that is exposed to salt water. I have something today. Is last year I bought a new riding lawnmower. Oh, Gary, after 19 years, I finally treated myself to a new lawnmower. I felt so proud, and I got a riding mower. I was really comfortable. Had a really good. You know, your viewers don't know that I'm very tall. I'm about 6'4". And I got a model in which I felt really comfortable and got in. Well, the salt water came into my garage enough. I don't know if it got into the motor, and that's tough because it was very evident when I turned it over, the motor was not happy. So I suspect probably some salt water got in there. But here's the insidious part. The wheels were under salt water, and already I can feel the friction that is being developed from the corrosion that's coming from salt water.
Yeah, so axles and bearings are going.
In Fran, in 1996, we left my wife's car in the garage. The storm surge was high enough that we took 4.5 feet from that hurricane, the worst one of all. And her car was picked up by the storm surge, bashed into a piling inside our garage, a structural piling, which put a huge dent in it, and then landed back down. It couldn't start. And the interesting thing was when the tow truck came to claim it on the insurance claim, the tow truck operator could put the transmission in a neutral, but the car wouldn't budge. And the wheels had frozen. Absolutely frozen, and it took 3 gigantic yanks for even to budge the first time, and when it did, it just groaned. So that's how insidious salt is to a situation. So we found things like my riding lawnmower, my push mower, bicycles in our garage had gone underwater. I had, unfortunately, some tools that had fallen down from the wall, probably from the force of the wind, that were underwater. And as somebody originally from Illinois, you'll be really upset to hear this. These were Craftsman. And where am I going to take them now for their lifetime warranty?
Is Sears done with that, I guess?
Sears Home Store. That's the new breed there. So that's the type of thing.
So nobody's honoring the Craftsman warranty anymore. Sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when people used to go to yard sales and get excited about seeing a broken Craftsman hammer, and they'd grab for 25 cents and then take it back to Sears and get a new hammer.
So what was the condition of the house once you got there?
Good.
Better than expected?
Surprisingly good. One of the things that, for people who go through a hurricane, particularly if you live by the water, and with storm surge, is that despite the fact that your house is on pilings, despite the fact that you know structurally that it will withstand the wind and the water, nevertheless, the house is subject to tremendous vibrations and forces. So you will see, it will probably manifest itself 3 to 4 months from now, settlement cracks that will develop as a result of movement of the house. That's just inevitable when you have this type of situation. I've got floorboards that what began as a level floor at one point is almost looks like an absurd V in my living room, and that's just from previous hurricanes where that whole part of the house was just underwent tremendous force movement. So, but otherwise, on those pictures, you may, if you've got the Facebook pictures, the same one where you've got the one of the marsh grass that had come in from the marsh that deposited itself by my HVAC units. In those set of photos, there should be one also, Gary, of the siding on my house. My house is painted blue, and you may see where some of the paint has been removed from the siding.
Showing that now.
If you find that, one of the things is, particularly living near a barrier island, when the wind comes through, the wind picks up sand, and so you've got this really sandblasting effect, which can be very pronounced. And one of the aftermaths of a coastal hurricane like this is that your home is the siding of your home is just being beaten up by high winds, but high winds containing sand, so it's an abrasion. And I think there's a photo in there where I show how much of my paint's been removed from the siding of my home.
Let's see, yeah, it's a fairly close up where it looks, and so that's wind and sand and not water. That's
not water. No, that's wind and sand.
Okay. Yeah. Now I got a better picture of the pilings that are holding things up. I think. It looks like just 4x4s. Yeah, they're
actually 8x8s.
Okay. Once again, Scale is hard to tell.
In case you're wondering about the length, they're 8x8 by 28 feet, and they're sunk down. I'm trying to remember how far down they go. Doing the math in my head, I think they're down around 14 feet. And then around each piling, before it goes into the ground, from an engineering standpoint, each piling is has 2 holes cut in, and 2 large pieces of iron rebar are inserted as a cross. And once the piling is put in and is aligned, then a concrete collar is poured around that iron rebar cross, which is submerged about 6 feet below the surface. And that's to provide another round of reinforcement in the piling holding the building together.
And this is 1970s code.
The main part of the house didn't have the collar. That area, if it's where I think you're looking, is an addition we put in 1993. That was a 1993 code as a result of the collar approach was something that developed in Dade County, Florida. We were told at the time that we did that installation.
Okay. So now that you've been back a few days, have you wandered into town to see what's left of town?
I have not been to downtown Wilmington. I'm getting to a point, this is terrible to say, but you may understand this a little bit. You live in an area, you get used to what I call your mile, which is everything you have that you need in your mile. And in my mile, I've got my grocery store, I've got the hardware store, I've got most of my day-to-day necessities. And so unless there's a special event to go downtown, as many folks in Raleigh may know, that downtown Wilmington is very vibrant, has a very vibrant arts community, which makes it a very delightful place to be. But unless you go downtown for arts or some high-end cuisine, then it may not necessarily be. It's a place really more as a destination rather than day-to-day. So I'm out closer to the Wrightsville Beach area, and out that way I've got my little mile. And to answer your question, almost everything is open now in that area.
Grocery stores have got their perishables.
The perishables are back.
Okay, so it's livable.
I got lettuce. I got milk. I'm back in business.
All right. Let me ask a little bit about that ham radio thing that we share. You were saying that the cell phone service never died.
Right.
I mean, you weren't there all of this time, but you were able to call people, and your reports are there was always service.
Yes.
So you got a ham radio community. They drill, they practice using their radio equipment. The thing that hams say is that when all else fails, ham radio can still get through.
Yes.
Did they need to do anything?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in New Hanover County, the county EOC, Emergency Operations Center, had a ham operator in there. I don't know whether commercial communication was lost, and the ham was necessary for passing messages back and forth. And also, 2 of the 5 shelters that were initially open were staffed by ham operators in the event the communications went down. The meeting, in fact, there was supposed to be a meeting tomorrow night of the area emergency communications group, but everyone's so exhausted that the leader canceled it. So I don't have firsthand information if communications went down to an extent that they were required to send messages back and forth via amateur radio.
Yeah, my experience has been that we have a lot of standby and not a lot of actual need. And as commercial and cellular infrastructure gets better and more ubiquitous, that just continues to be the case.
I agree. And actually, it really is a testament to how far we have come from the infancy of cellular communications, and the method of communication too, in the sense that it wasn't that long ago that, and I'm a little news hound like you, Gary. Come on, let's face it. We're
emphasis on
we get
old.
excited when a 75 baud teletype machine lights up and rings 3 bells. The adrenaline gets going. But I was very, very pleased with things that made this hurricane much more palatable this time were the tremendous coverage that stations like WRAL and the Triangle did, especially as a Wilmingtonian who was away. I was very encouraged to see the amount of coverage coming from there. The fact that the cellular network stayed up and that social media was as pronounced as it was. I'm not personally on Instagram, but I can tell you that Twitter, to a certain extent, for what I use it for, but especially Facebook, was highly, highly informative. And these really neat apps that have come out that have brought people together, like Zello, that we talked about earlier, which form community group chat groups. All of them are just highly efficacious in getting information out.
Okay, one more thing I'll mention about the hams, and we'll talk about Zello for a minute, and that is the hams, as the other circuits, the more the professional and the emergency management circuits are doing better and don't need the backup quite so much, but they still need personnel, and the hams are being trained as volunteers to operate not the ham equipment, but the highway patrol equipment, the emergency management stuff.
Yes,
because they can't staff for all of that stuff to be run 24 hours a day for a week or so. That we just have to hire too many people. So hams are getting trained to do that.
Right, and you're right. The versatility, that's the new model which is emerging because of the high reliability of commercial applications now, that and the strengthening and hardening of infrastructure that remains up. You're exactly right, Gary. The next wave of versatility is not going to be amateur radio by itself, but somebody of the caliber of an amateur radio operator, kind of what we call the MacGyvers of communications, being able to string together both commercial, readily accessible, and, if as a last resort, amateur communications, whatever it takes to get the message through.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about this Zello thing. This is my phone with the Zello app on it. It's basically a walkie-talkie, turns your phone into a walkie-talkie. Now, you can do what we're doing. We're talking on Facebook.
Yes.
Facebook Messenger, which we could do, which is just kind of a two-way thing without pushing any buttons. You do the same thing on Skype. You can do it on Google Hangouts. This becomes more walkie-talkie-ish because you have to push a button to talk and let go to listen, which is what we're used to on doing the ham radio thing. Its advantage of one person talking to another is not that great. Its advantage is in putting groups together. Hundreds of people. Skype, none of the other services can do several hundred people all in one place, most of whom are not going to be talking. They're just going to be listening. And every once in a while, they need to add something or ask a question, and they push the button and they get in with the group and everybody hears them. And that's what Zello is doing for you. And you can make your own. You can make your own group where you and your friends can hang out and all monitor silently in the background until someone wants to say something to the group and they push a button. People have been doing that with text for a long time, but we talk. We don't type so much. We like talking. What I ran into, though, there were maybe a dozen groups that had some connection to Hurricane Florence. I didn't see the ones specifically for Wilmington. I might have dialed into those just to listen. Some talking about emergency management, some talking about just places to go for communication and emergencies and information. What I found was chaos. Uncontrolled chaos. People pushing their buttons. Where's the hurricane at? And that all the time. Every few minutes, somebody's saying, I just got on. Where's the hurricane? You can find out where the hurricane is by turning on your TV or your radio, or your a web app or something. And they've got that because they're talking on their phone. They've got an internet connection and they're talking on their phone. They can find that many different ways rather than, where's the hurricane at? There were some people that were there that were trying to maintain some order, but none of these people had much training. The users had no training. The folks that were administrators, I think they had some. They were talking about a video to go watch and you could become an instant administrator. But they were doing a very poor job. The hams have been drilling and training for years, for decades, on making their radio circuits controlled with some success. Mm-hmm. Not universal, but some success.
Yes, I agree.
So if you're going to try Zello for something like that, I would say don't expect a highly utilitarian application for general information. And as we were talking about at the beginning of the show, consider the source. You don't know who is, you ask, where's the hurricane at? And somebody tells you something and you don't know if they know what they're talking about. And
right.
Having listened to two ways on that, go ahead.
However, in fairness, I think it has high potential to be a good tool, because when I listened to the Wilmington chat groups, I was getting maybe out of 10% of the conversations some little gleaning fact that would be relevant to me, such as gasoline supplies, traffic patterns, electrical recovery information. So you're absolutely right. You had it was a classic situation of just dismissing 90% of the conversation as chaff, but keeping an ear for that 10% that was the pure wheat.
Yeah, I guess I could compare it to Channel 19 on CB.
Exactly.
And a decade or so ago, maybe 2 decades ago, it was fairly useful, and it got worse and worse to the point where it was too painful to listen to pull out that little bit of information. And now I don't need it because that red line will show up on Google Maps or Waze and tell me that I'm about to hit a backup.
10-4, good buddy.
Yeah, and get me around it. All right. Well, I'm glad that you have survived.
We're here. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity tonight to share some observations from a hurricane. I really do want to commend, really, as a North Carolinian, and I can say that now, despite my lack of an accent. I've lived well over half my life in the Tar Heel State, and I've really come to embrace it. I really felt that this was it continues to be a shining moment for North Carolinians. And I realize every region of the country, when it has a disaster, has resources that pull people together to make them strong. So I'm not saying that we're better or more resilient than Texans with tornadoes or Californians with
Texans
wildfires,
get hurricanes too,
and earthquakes, but I do want to say that this has been a shining moment in North Carolina, and I'm proud of what's now my home state and how everyone reacted well to Hurricane Florence.
Yeah. And I guess I would like to add that, well, you have survived well, and I didn't ask much about insurance, but you've got it. A lot of your damage will be covered. Your insurance is probably pretty expensive, because they're kind of expecting things to get clobbered.
But I'm grandfathered, which is, and I'm in a situation that can't be replicated what that means is that, particularly my flood insurance, I am what's called pre-FIRM, F-I-R-M, which stands for Flood Insurance Resource Management. And what that means is that my house was built prior to the mapping of floodplains in the area. And because it was, I'm allowed to have and continue to have living space on my ground floor level. And also under the 2014, I hope I get this right, Bigger's Waters Act. And the waters in this case has nothing to do with the liquid, but rather with the name of the individual legislator who was part of this, that those of us with these grandfathered flood policies will be allowed to, we have a, not a cap, but we have a lower rate of premium increases than people who have newer flood insurance policies. Plus, I have contents covered, which newer flood policies do not. And all that's grandfathered. If I let it go or if I sell my home, the new person cannot pick up that policy. That's only for us as the original owners.
Yeah. So you're in better shape than most.
Correct. From that regard, yes.
There's plenty of people that didn't buy flood insurance either because they couldn't or because they never expected a flood.
Right.
There are people that are in pretty bad shape out there.
There are. And there's very much a need for supplies and help and volunteers. I heard something years ago, Gary, and I think I want to share this with your viewers. I thought it was an excellent point. It was a consortium of ministers or clergy who were talking about help in disasters. And the remark was that an event like a Florence, it stays in the public's mind for roughly 30 to 60 days, and then much of its impact begins to dissipate. And we know that there are people, particularly in just south of Wilmington, North Carolina, in towns like Fairbluff, Cerro Gordo, who are still trying to recover from Hurricane Matthew.
Oh, plenty, yeah.
Yeah, and so my point is that hurricane relief can easily go on for 2 to 3 years after the event, and so as your viewers think downstream, what's relevant, and we tend to be in a society that focuses very near term. The aftermath of this will be very prevalent for months and most likely years to come.
Yeah. And there'll be more hurricanes coming by as that happens.
That's exactly right.
So, but it's still a nice place to live.
That's right.
Or so you tell me. I'm glad that they have houses on the beach we can rent. I don't think I'd want to buy one.
Yes, and let somebody else take care of the problems.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe we'll get a chance to see you in a couple of weeks when we spend some time at Holden. If there's a road open between,
grand to get together.
Yeah.
And congratulations on the launch of your new program. I hope it brings you and Cindy and all your viewers much success and also a lot of value added to life in the Triangle.
Yeah. The terminology that we're using at this point is all my viewer.
Okay. May that be. Big thumbs up.
Actually, there was like 44 of them that watched the last one and more that get the audio. This is an audio show more than a video show, so we get more audio participation, which is fine. The video stuff is just because I happen to own the cameras. So why not? And
that's great.
And YouTube is
free. I have a face for radio.
We both do. For those that are just listening, a guy popped up in the news a year or so ago that just constantly reminds me of you when he comes on. Has anybody ever else told you that you both look and sound like Jim Comey?
No, but I've got an interesting thing for you. There's a 2-mile walking area around Wrightsville Beach, which is appropriately called The Loop, and it's very popular for people of all ages to go walking. Somebody has stuck a sticker on the back of one of the signs there, and I honestly think, Gary, it's your doppelganger. I really need to take a picture of it and send it to you.
Maybe I'll come by and take a look when we're down there visiting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up. This has been the Triangle Talk Show, episode 29 from September 24th, 2018. Our man in Wilmington, that man is Bill Morine. Thank you, Bill, for showing up on the show.
Thanks, Gary, for the opportunity to be here tonight. Appreciate it.
And I am Gary Pierce, and I am going to push the goodbye button for YouTube Live. You hang on for just a second. I need to do something here.